Since the Anchorage School District announced its School Start 2020 plan, we've received hundreds of questions from members of the community. This new twice-weekly video series will attempt to tackle our most frequently asked questions. I'm Lisa Miller, a communications specialist with the Anchorage School District. Today I'm joined by Superintendent Dina Bishop and Deputy Superintendent Mark Stock. Our first topic will be the risk levels that have been outlined by the district to operate under. So we'll take a deep dive into these, and then also the decision-making metrics that goes into shifting from one risk level to another. But before we do that, Dr. Bishop, would you give us just a quick overview of the School Start plan that was announced this month and what that looks like?
Sure. So to start just with the history of the School Start plan, there really was direction from the State Department of Education and Early Development, or what we call DEED, our Commissioner of Education, as well as Dr. Zink and the state epidemiologist. They really worked together to create a framework for schools all over Alaska to have plans for starting of school. And it's called the Alaska Smart Start, and of course ours is School Start for 2020. And what we've done is taken that framework and overlaid it on our context of the Anchorage School District. And you can see that we have the tenets of the plan were kind of like a traffic light, red, yellow, green. And that really came from the state. And what we've done is taken the standardization that they've done and really customized it to Anchorage. And Mark can share about all the individual levels, but the main thing that everyone should know is that this plan, because of those risk levels, they were designed to be flexible, and we have to be nimble. And one thing we found out from this virus is that we have to be able to make decisions, and make decisions well, using the community conditions and the science, experts and the doctors out there to help us understand this virus and understand the safety and protocols behind school. Nevertheless, whatever the condition is in the community is going to ultimately dictate how we do school. And a couple of weeks ago, we announced medium high risk. It was to kind of have a roll-in of school. At that time, due to the metrics that we're going to share in a little bit, we were at that level, at an intermediate level. But by the start of school, we could be in a high risk. By the start of school, we could be in a low risk. And those have different probabilities, but understanding that it can change and it will, and that all of us in the community need to be ready for what comes next.
Right. Yeah, I'm a planner myself, but that's, I think what I've learned through this process is you don't know what week to week things are going to look like. So just kind of, being, like you said, nimble and flexible.
And that is probably the most difficult on our families and really our employees about what is my job going to look like, and what can I get my kids to school, and what kind of daycare, and what is it going to look like? I want our community to know that this is, for the people that are planning this, and really for the people around the world that are doing this, all this is new planning and new judgments using the best data that we have. So there isn't a playbook we're going by other than just the information from the experts in the medical field.
Yeah. Thank you. And Dr. Stock, if you can kind of take us into these risk levels, and what will a day at school look like at each one of these unique risk levels that ASD has defined?
Well, Lisa, I think the easiest ones to understand are the two on the end. So low risk for us, that looks like school as usual that we used to know and love and understand, and that would be students coming to school 5 days a week, students having a full student day of 6.5 hours, and so on. And so we called that low risk. We did a survey with a community advisory group we had, and we asked them, how likelihood do you think it will be that we would be in low risk, soon? And there was no one who felt like low risk was a high probability to start school. So I think we all understand that's tough right now.
On that side.
But on the high risk end of it, that one's easy to understand too, because it means that it's somewhere in the district, whether it would be in a cluster at a school or district-wide, we've determined that it's a high risk to have school at all. So that would be e-learning 5 days a week. So we would be home, not at school in brick and mortar, in a high risk environment as far as our students. The two in the middle, those medium risk, we put it in two categories because we felt like we needed to start school on a kind of a slow roll in to get people used to learning all the safety protocols and the wearing of masks and all the pieces that we put in place for safety. And so Our thought right now is if we stayed in a medium high risk is that we would start school 2 days a week. So students would be split into an alphabet-based sort of, A through L in one group and M through Z in another, with the exception of families who need to have a different day. We'll work with them. If there's some reason why work or school, keeping your family units together, we would work with them. But the point is they would start 2 days a week, Monday and Tuesday, or Thursday and Friday if you're in the other group. And that would be 5.5 hours a day. And the other days they would be doing some form of e-learning during that time, because our plan is to have teachers have all of their curriculum and materials, to most of it, in an online environment, so that if we go to high risk because of escalating cases, then we would be able to access the materials from home. So that's pretty much the plan for medium high risk. If things went well and there weren't any outbreaks or they were declining and things were stable, we could go to school 5 days a week with all our students.
Now, thank you for that explanation. I want to kind of dive into this e-learning category. Internally around the building and on meetings, I've heard the terms synchronous and asynchronous a lot. I think families are still kind of understanding what that means. So I think we understand that for 2 days, students will be at school in their cohort, shorter day, smaller group. But then I know that there's one day, is it synchronous, and then the other 2 are asynchronous, is that correct?
Well, the starting of school is going to be a little unusual because during those first 2-3 weeks, the e-learning days are going to be not as synchronous as you would think. Synchronous means live, like the teachers actually reaching out to the students.
Doing it together. At the same time as synchronous, doing it at different times. So I could, if I'm learning something, I might be with the whole entire class with the teacher online. That's synchronous. We're synchronously doing it. Asynchronous is I know my work and I know my lessons, and I can do it at 10 p.m. at night or 6 a.m. in the morning if I wanted to. Mm-hmm. Different than the rest of my classmates and even my teacher.
Okay. All right. Thank you for that.
Well, that's interesting because what we learned in the spring is that the vast majority of especially our older students, they tend to do most of their work between about 10 p.m. and 2 a.m. when it comes to their natural schedules. So
that's why we wanted School Start changing. Yeah. We find out a lot when they log in and when they don't, because of course logging into our lessons goes through our server for safety reasons, and so we can just take a look at when they pull the data.
Okay. All right. So for that e-learning 3-day plan, 1 day will be synchronous with the teacher. Does that means online then?
Well, it really depends on how they plan. That Wednesday will be the day that the teacher can check in with all kids, either cohort. And so he or she might schedule a noon meeting or another lesson or a carry-through lesson, or meet with small groups individually, so not the whole class, and schedule it throughout the day. So it'll have some flexibility, but that Wednesday is really an opportunity for teachers to check in on the students that are home, because the other 2 days, the teacher, again, is going to be with these groups of kids, with those groups of kids, and then the Wednesday is really the day for him or her to be able to kind of catch up, take an account. Part of online learning isn't really about teaching and looking at a computer 24/7. It's really learning the skills and the programs, and then being able to move off and do it and then have a check. When you are an online teacher, you're really a facilitator and a coach and a mentor, because certainly what online learning allows is that individualized practice, so that the systems can really meet where students are. If student needs more advanced work, the actual online system can provide more advanced work. If the student needs reteaching and more practice, the systems will allow for that practice. So it's not necessarily you wouldn't have any education or be learning if a teacher isn't right on there. It's just that the teacher really guides that work and is that expert in understanding what is next to help set students up.
Mm-hmm. I think another piece that's really critical is for everyone to realize that we knew that this these plans aren't going to be perfect for everyone in every circumstance. So one of the things we did was we kind of separated into what we're calling ASD at school and ASD at home. Is kind of two ways to think about it. So if a parent does not feel safe with their students returning to school right away, the idea was that they could choose an ASD virtual option, which would allow them to stay connected to their home school as far as knowing what's going on in that school, being still enrolled at their local neighborhood school, if that's their choice, and still being able to access the materials virtually online. And so an ASD teacher would be assigned to facilitate, as Dr. Bishop was explaining.
And that's one of the biggest questions that comes from that, Lisa, is that if I choose ASD virtual, and I'm still connected to my school, do I lose my spot in my class? Or say there's a specialized program, an immersion or another. Any kind of lottery that whatever school that you're assigned ASD virtual, you remain at that school, so you don't lose anything. Wow. Now, if a parent and a family decide to leave that school and go to another school for online, then obviously you're leaving that school, so you would leave that spot. But if you do ASD virtual tied to your home school, you're a student at that school. That's your school. That's still your principal. Mm-hmm. And a teacher from your school is going to be that coach that I talked about working with parents to get virtual learning happening. So I think we've met parents where they want. We've set up, at home, in school, blended, just to meet the many different needs of our families.
Right. So families that are just kind of at the place where they might not care what risk level we say we're at. They're not comfortable sending their kids to school. They can choose these at-home options. And I think you did a good job there of explaining the difference between the new ASD virtual versus the traditional homeschool. So with the virtual, you're still tied to your community school, and then homeschool that's where you would be unenrolled and switching to a full homeschool option.
I have had a parent ask, I think there is one question that's still a little confusing to some people, and that is, well, what's the difference between being in a high-risk environment, ASD at school, where I'm home and I'm online with curriculum, versus the ASD virtual? Well, the difference is that in the ASD high-risk environment, even though we're at home, we might be lower risk, medium low risk, or something in the next month, and you would come back to brick and mortar. The concept of the ASD virtual is that it's 100% working offline with a teacher from ASD and not going to school at all, no matter what the risk levels are.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Not necessarily he used the word offline, you're really online.
But, good point.
Yeah. So you had mentioned about those risk levels, and I know that this is one of the biggest questions about how do you know what you know?
Right.
And just wanted to share with our community, and we had mentioned it in our press conference when we shared, but that was the biggest question. Like, you say you're in a medium risk, how do you know? Well, we really use the experts' opinions here and the community conditions to guide that information. If you take a look on the Department of Health and Social Services, they've outlined, and this was really, I believe, for nursing homes and other things, they've outlined a medium, low, and high risk model. And they do all their modeling and metrics online. It's a great dashboard. I encourage anyone to go there to find more information. They do that modeling on the number of new cases per 100,000. And that's how we have been using it. And to really drill down more to be ASD specific so that we don't have to guess. We've taken the information and taken our population in Anchorage and then really drilled down. And so these are the categories on the left-hand side. Those are the colors and the categories defined by the Department of Health and Social Services. If you look, they have high, intermediate, and low. The terminology that the education department uses at the state is high, medium, and low. And the different colors are true to what those departments use. But what we've done is really put them together so that the understanding can be made that we would be in high risk if the average over 14 days of new cases was above 29. Okay. Now, we look at them daily. Everybody's paying attention. The news, does it. We look at them daily. We can also look at them by week too, so that you can have a little bit have more agility if you need to for any kind of spikes or lowering. But but the actual high, intermediate, and low is really a 14-day average of new cases. And so right now, Anchorage is in an intermediate range. So if you move over, what does that look like for us? That looks like we're in a medium range for school. And Mark already shared why we chose medium-low to have that slower roll-in. But we may look, and see where might we be otherwise in another 2 weeks. And so we keep an eye on this. I know that you had mentioned, somebody thinking we were going to change. And, and I want everyone to know, yes, there will be changes because it's continually monitored. Mm-hmm. But they can rest assured that we're using metrics that are transparent, that are out there, that are based on what we know about our community conditions.
And I think Dr. Bishop meant medium-high there when she talked about starting. You said low, but you were looking at medium-high there.
Oh.
But that's the one where we would start with the 2 days a week until we got all our safety protocols established and everyone was comfortable with what we're doing to keep people safe. And then if things are dropping or stable, there's a possibility we could go medium-low.
So we gave ourselves kind of a buffer, if you will, to slowly reopen schools in that intermediate state. We kind of added an additional layer, it looks like. Can you talk a little bit about the differences between, we talked about medium and high. So when people are looking at that dashboard, they really, when the daily numbers come out, you're looking for Anchorage, correct? Because that's what's going to make our decision. Will that be for the district as a whole, or will different schools be in different levels?
That's a great question. And the answer is yes, both actually could happen. If we open up schools in a medium high or medium and low and things are trucking away well, there may be a case, and we know that there will be. No plans whatsoever, I don't think, in any kind of business or other function are we actually eliminating COVID. We're mitigating. This plan is not going to stop the virus. That's not possible for us. But to continue school, we may have, and we have another matrix that hopefully you have the safety folks come and talk about what happens if there is a case. And then it really is determined by school to school or even possibly classrooms because we're keeping children in cohorts. But for the most part, in the large beginning of opening would really be based off of our community. So we would choose a spot to open according to the entire community. And then as we move forward, we might be in a medium high or a medium low, and then there might be a case in a school. And at that time, we have a plan in another matrix, a decision-making matrix, about what to do about that. Is it a cluster of cases? Is it a family? Is it contained? Or are there a couple of cases that are community spread? So those are our decisions, and we have decision-making tree for that, response for that, all based off of the best practices. And hopefully that can be another topic to really look at. What would happen if a case was found either in a staff member or a student?
Well, thank you both so much for being here and really going through this chart with us, explaining what it means. Anything else you wanted to add before we wrap up?
No, I think the only thing I would finish with is just the reminder about the cohort model is a key part of this we haven't talked about that we can delve into in future sessions here. But that's just a reminder that we're trying to keep our elementary students contained. We're trying to reduce the course load for our upper students so that in middle and high school they don't travel and change classes as often. So there's an effort to try to reduce the interactions, which further reduces a risk of exposure. And that's a key part of all of this. That's the plan for the face-to-face work.
And then the cohort, kind of jumping back to the other slide, if we go into that medium-low, does the cohort still stay together okay.
And that's the key. I believe that Dr. Zink uses, and Dr. McLaughlin from the state, he's the state epidemiologist, they use the term bubble. You create a bubble around your family. Well, we are creating a bubble family in schools, and so that we will know whom those students interact with and who the teachers do as well, so that it's in a group. And even teachers aren't going to move to lots of different kids. We want to keep teachers and kids together. If you can kind of think, Mark mentioned a one-room schoolhouse at one time is kind of how you can picture that.
Yep.
And Green Gables, right?
Yeah.
Well, it's certainly unusual times, but our goal is to keep kids safe and get kids back in school if we can.
We know that learning in school is beneficial for our community and our students, for parents going back to work, for our economy, for everything. We just need to do it safely. And so one of the things actually that I would love to ask our community, that what you do depends on how school will happen. Please wear your masks. Please follow no large gatherings. Do whatever you can to mitigate the risk in your community, in your neighborhood, in your family, because if you do your job, we can do our job. We need to keep our students, and especially our staff who are coming every day, willing to come, those that want to teach and want to be there, we want to keep them safe and healthy as well.
Yeah, we're all in this together, right?
Right.
Yep. Thank you for your time.
You're very welcome.
Thanks for tuning in, and we'll continue to post these videos twice weekly through the start of the school year. There's still time to give us your feedback. We'll link to the Google form where you can submit your questions and concerns.